Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us here today. As Principal of the University of Glasgow, I'm really delighted that the University has been able to play host to this very important event, one that is particularly timely as we deal with differential impacts of inflation, of the energy crisis, and the economic recovery from the pandemic. The times that we're living through, in many respects, make the arguments against the old model of economic analysis based solely around growth. Now, don't get me wrong, growth is hugely important because, as we've seen over the last period of recovery through COVID, unless we can maintain productivity growth, actually everything, including the race to net zero, and indeed the issue of standards of living and public service funding becomes much more complicated. But it's now widely accepted amongst economists that an emphasis simply on growth in GVA per capita offers too limited a view on development outcome and requires a broader set of indicators on progress. And growth and progress have to be felt right across society and indeed between countries if they are to be truly meaningful. Fairer outcomes are not just good for those at the very bottom who will benefit from them already directly. They'll benefit everyone in the long run. And this is part of the OECD's analysis in this area around the trade-offs of inequality and growth, that actually reducing inequality boosts productivity and helps to solve some of the major social problems which have blighted our society for too long. Actually today, some of you may have noticed, it's actually the 59th anniversary of the death of President John F. Kennedy. And I want to borrow something that he said in his inauguration speech from our introductory remarks. He said the following, he said, "If a free society cannot help the many who are poor, it cannot save the few who are rich." And I hope that today's event is a valuable forum for us to discuss the progress being made towards creating the well-being economy amongst different countries that are debating how to create the well-being economy and give us the impetus to accelerate this progress even further. It really is fantastic to see the list of participants, to see so many eminent representatives in their fields, not just from Scotland, as I say, but from many countries, many parts of the world, a demonstration that there's a real momentum behind this idea. So I'm really delighted also that we're joined here today by the Cabinet Secretary for the Constitution, External Affairs and Culture, Angus Robertson. The Cabinet Secretary and the Scottish Government have provided incredibly important leadership internationally as we work towards understanding the key priorities for a well-being economy, which has been vital to bringing us to this point. Of course, making progress on the well-being economy is of particular importance to Scotland. For all of our lifetimes, economic progress, as I say, has been geographically unbalanced and sectorally unbalanced, and we remain a country of particular economic contrasts and social divides, even here locally. If you look at Glasgow, our great city in particular has an unenviable reputation for income, health and social inequalities, despite our almost unparalleled industrial legacy and the great wealth that has flowed through this city. So growth alone has not been enough to sustain and ensure the social and environmental needs, the well-being of all of our communities here in our city. So the work already done on this in Scotland with partner countries like Iceland, like New Zealand, Wales, Finland and Canada really has, I think, genuine potential to deliver something of a quiet revolution in how we manage our economy. So I'm really looking forward to hearing, as an economist myself, I'm really looking forward to hearing more about the work that's been done so far and the opportunities to deliver further momentum towards a well-being economy. And with that, can we welcome our keynote speaker, Cabinet Secretary Angus Robertson.
Thank you very much, Anton. It's a pleasure to be here with you all for today's conference. And this setting is very fitting. Particular word of thanks to everybody who's come from a bit further away. I'm not just talking about people like me from Edinburgh, but to those of you who've come from outside Scotland, the rest of the UK, perhaps from the rest of Europe or further afield. It's tremendous that we have such an international gathering about something that is so exciting, so important and so challenging as a well-being economy. It was at this university, after all, back in 2017 that the Scottish Government held a very significant conference on inclusive growth. The focus for that event was the challenge of tackling rising inequality in advanced economies. It was attended by a wide range of international partners and academics. And it was at a breakfast meeting during the conference that the idea of forming a coalition to develop and advance a new economic approach was discussed. And it was from that discussion that the WIGO network of Wellbeing economy governments was born, and also, of course, provided the spark which led to the creation of the Wellbeing Economy Alliance. So this is a very appropriate place for us to come together, to consider the progress that we've made in achieving our shared vision, and I'm delighted that so many people are taking part in today's event, including representatives from other WIGO members. And I want to take this opportunity to thank the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, Carnegie UK and the University of Glasgow for organising it. The last time this conference was held in person, of course, was in January 2020, and that was just a few months before the start of the first lockdown in Scotland, and it's almost impossible to overstate how much things have changed in the period since. In that time, the COVID-19 pandemic presented us with some of our greatest challenges that we've ever faced. Even now, its impacts are being felt in almost every aspect of the economy and of our society. And those impacts are compounding the other huge challenges that now confront us, from the current cost crisis to the climate emergency. The scale and urgency of these crises coming so close together is like nothing that we've ever seen before in our lifetimes. Their combined effect has been to expose some of the biggest weaknesses in the global economic system. And they've forced countries around the world to ask some fundamental questions about what we value and about what our economies are actually for. If we take the pandemic as an example, it's been the ultimate lesson in why countries need strong and resilient public services. We know that economic prosperity and the revenues that it generates are vital in helping to fund those services. But traditional measures of economic success, such as GDP, tell us nothing about how well these services are actually delivered, or the contribution that they themselves make to people's lives and to their livelihoods. Similarly, when it comes to the cost crisis, we know one of the key drivers is the energy market. It has consistently delivered major profits for energy suppliers, but as we're seeing, it is not delivering reliable or affordable prices for most of its customers. And despite the growth in renewables, those prices are still based, to a large extent, on demand for fossil fuels, which have caused the climate crisis. Here again, traditional metrics of economic success only tell one part of the story. They don't reflect key aspects of the real economy, from the cost of mitigating and adapting to climate change to the cost of providing care to those who are elderly or people who are unwell. So, the need for a new economic model has never been clearer, and that's why I think we're seeing such growing interest in the wellbeing economy approach, both here and around the world. WIGO, the network of wellbeing economy governments, now includes Scotland, Iceland, New Zealand, Finland, and Wales. Other countries are also engaging ever more closely with the network. For example, Canada is now participating fully. And all of the members are continuing to work with and learn from one another. Just yesterday, for example, representatives from the WIGO network met here at the university to share ideas and to develop future plans. Scotland is determined to build on this kind of engagement and to strengthen the network further. And that's why we've committed to appointing a dedicated WIGO ambassador whose role will be to promote the vision of a wellbeing economy internationally. The ambassador will help to share and highlight members' experience and expertise, and by doing so we think they can play an important role in advancing the wellbeing agenda here at home. Because creating a wellbeing economy remains a defining mission for the Scottish Government. Last month, in our latest constitution paper, we set out how Scotland could use the powers of independence to more fully achieve that aim. But even now, with the powers we do have, we're already seeking to make a fundamental shift in direction, and that's reflected in our strategy for economic transformation. It's the first economic strategy we've published which explicitly emphasises well-being. And in line with the National Performance Framework, it takes a much broader view of what an economy is actually for. It emphasises that a strong and stable economy is a means, not an end in itself. It's a means by which we strengthen our society and protect people's well-being. But it also recognises that we will only achieve these ends by having an economy which is sustainable, which benefits people, and which is consistent with our environmental aims. That means we reject the prevailing economic model still clung to by some developed countries, which the OECD describes as grow first, redistribute, and clean up later. In fact, in the brief interlude that was the Liz Truss UK government, we saw evidence that even the markets, whose guardians of traditional economics, no longer subscribe fully to such an approach. In our view, economic activity should be geared from the outset towards the creation of a fairer, greener, and more resilient society. So our new economic strategy sets Scotland on that path. But of course, it's just one example of taking this new approach. For example, our Just Transition Commission, established in statute, is the first of its kind anywhere in the world. It has a central role in guiding Scotland's move towards net zero in a way which prioritises people, employment, and communities. I was very encouraged at COP27 last month by the emerging focus on just transition and a growing interest in the work Scotland is doing. Alongside that, earlier this year, we established the new Centre of Expertise in Equality and Human Rights within the Scottish Government. It aims to build capacity, knowledge and skills on equality and human rights matters among policy officials. And in June, we published our first Wellbeing Economy Monitor, which tracks broader economic outcomes on issues like health, equality, fair work and the environment. It'll be published at least once a year and will help us assess Scotland's progress in creating a wellbeing economy. So we're taking important action at a national and an international level, but we also know it's essential for wellbeing approaches to be taken forward locally. And that's why, for example, we're working closely with local authorities on community wealth building, which gives local communities more power to shape their own economic development. It's why next year we'll consult on legislation that will make it easier to implement that model across Scotland. Our plan is to legislate in the current parliamentary session. And it's also why, over the past couple of years, the Scottish Government and Clackmannanshire Council have worked together on a wellbeing economy pilot project. The aim of the project was to identify the key factors affecting wellbeing outcomes in the local area, as well as the interventions which would have the most impact. And I can announce that based on what we've learned, the Scottish Government is today publishing a new toolkit which will help other local authorities embed wellbeing policies in their own economic plans. However, I'm conscious, as all of you are, that we still have a very long way to go. Last week, the Wellbeing Economy Alliance wrote to the First Minister suggesting some of the next steps that we need to take. And we welcome your suggestions because they're very much in line with the Scottish Government's own thinking. For example, you said that we should strengthen the power and reach of the National Performance Framework, and I agree with you. I know others are keen to include outcomes on care within the framework, and we're considering that carefully. Those are steps we could potentially take through upcoming legislation, and so we'll continue to engage widely on our plans for a wellbeing and sustainable development bill. You also called for a fundamental shift in the way businesses work to support well-being. That's a priority we've identified too, and it's why, for example, we're rolling out community wealth building, and it's why we established a Business for Purpose Commission to advise on how businesses can contribute more effectively to social and to environmental aims. You also said in your letter that we should use devolved tax powers to create a fairer, more equal society. And that's something we've already shown in our commitment to doing. Right now, Scotland has the most progressive tax system in the UK, and we're continuing to prioritise investment in our public services and our social security system. Just last week, for instance, we expanded the Scottish Child Payment, a benefit which only Scotland provides. It's been described as a game changer in the fight against child poverty, and it's already making a huge difference to the lives of families across the country. In many ways, in fact, the child payment is a perfect example of the wider approach that we are determined to take. The Scottish Government believes our country should have an economic system which provides people with security and which meets their needs. And that means building an economy which will enhance, rather than put at risk, the well-being of future generations. Young people, after all, are the ones who will have to live with the consequences of the decisions that we take now. And so we owe it to them to build an economy which will both enhance their lives and safeguard their future. And that's why we've prioritised policies like the Scottish Child Payment. It's why we're considering how the interests of future generations can be represented more formally in policy making as they are in Wales. And it's also, of course, why we think young people need to be heard in the kinds of discussions that we're having today. In a few moments, I'll be answering questions from some of the young people who are taking part in this event. And I very much look forward to hearing their perspectives on what will matter most to their future. For now, I want to thank you all for your commitment to this issue and for the work that you're doing. Building a well-being economy is a huge challenge for any country at any time. The current crises that we are facing make it harder. They make it a lot harder. But they also underline why we need to make this transformation as a matter of urgency. We've made progress in the past 5 years, but we still have much to do. And so my pledge is that the government in Scotland will continue to work with you to achieve our shared vision. I hope today's event will help to stimulate new ideas on how we do that, and I hope it will provide us all with fresh inspiration. And I hope it will further help us in working together to build the well-being economy that we all want to see. Thank you very much.